I hope we'll never do. Anyways, we're back on another exciting episode of Starfleet Boy, in which we have a casual and informal conversation about Star Trek. We're currently focused on Star Trek: The Next Generation, and today's episode is Tin Man.
Yes.
Tin Man. I'm
It's a
joined by
10.
my wow. Okay. Yes, that's true.
We just get out of the way. It's a 10.
Get it? It's a 10. This is a 10 episode. There's a few of them that we're gonna encounter along the way. We don't have a database person like Drunk Space Nine does to keep track of these things, but I was thinking of going back and reviewing our ratings and just keeping score somewhere. What do you think, Doctor?
That's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
I concur.
All right, I'll maybe I'll hire a Starfleet intern.
There we go.
Starfleet Boy intern to
Starfleet lad.
Or lassie.
Or lassie.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a lad. Okay, well, let's get right to it. We both just watched the episode, so it's fresh in our minds. So I think this time I am gonna have you give the summary, Doctor. So make it.
I thought
make
it was
so.
in your mind.
Make it so, Doctor. I'll assist you as you go.
The Enterprise is I don't know. They're doing something rather routine and something I think Picard says it's kind of tedious, which I thought was funny to include in the in the log. And suddenly they get a transmission from the Hood, the USS Hood, which we last saw, I believe, in Encounter at Farpoint.
No, and wasn't it just in another episode recently as well? It was the one that in the Sins of the Father, I think they're dropping off.
Oh, really? It was the Hood? Okay.
Maybe. I don't remember. But I just feel like the Hood seems like it's ferrying a lot of people across.
Which the captain kind of indicates. Right. But of course, the Hood previously... Captain DeSoto, who served with Picard at some earlier point. And Riker was aboard the Hood as a first officer. And, well, anyways, the Hood shows up, and it's carrying the infamous Tam Elbram. And with him, he has orders, special orders, to go to, it's, I guess I interpret it as, I think they indicate it's the furthest there has been any exploration. Don't they have a line like that? It's something the furthest like that. It's the furthest our Federation probes
yes, that's right.
Have gone. And of course the Romulans happen to claim that territory. And they've discovered this incredible discovery in orbit around a dying star, which is it seems to be a sentient spaceship of some kind, and it's an extraordinary discovery. And the episode is basically a race to make first contact with this new life form, and the Enterprise is, of course, the fastest and the best qualified ship to do so,
according to Captain DeSoto.
And so, of course, the Enterprise is dispatched right away. And I love the line where Captain Picard is like, "Well, why didn't they just communicate that to us through subspace?" And it says, "No, this is so important. It had to be basically almost hand delivered." This message, and it has to be because they don't want the Romulans to know.
The good old Romulans that fizzle out later on.
Right. So anyway, so the Enterprise is on its way. Now, they think they have a lead, but apparently they don't. This one Romulan commander has pushed the thresholds of the engines of the Romulan warbird, I forget what class it is, basically to the breaking point, so that it's a one-way mission just to get to this sentient ship, which is being referred to as Tin Man, to get there first and make first contact. Now, the Romulans are interested in making first contact, but if first contact is not made, then they're just going to basically dissect the thing.
Mhm.
And of course, the Federation is a little, it's not as adversarial, so they're genuinely interested in making first contact and peaceful peaceful contact with it. And basically, both ships pretty much get there around the same time, and the Romulans manage to damage the Enterprise just shy of reaching Tin Man, and this prompts the telepath, and his name is Tam Elbram?
Tam Elbram.
Tam Elbram, whom is a bit of how do we describe him? He's kind of a cagey character. He is a he's a Betazoid who was born right away with the ability to read minds. Apparently, this is very interesting. Betazoids
aren't born,
have the ability, but they're not born
with it. Yeah,
with knowing how to. They have to be trained to do this. Correct?
It's just something that develops later on. So it's because I guess somehow if I'm gonna use some kind of like head science here, head biology, I would imagine that betazoids, betazeds, betazans evolved so that when they're developing, their telepathic abilities come in later, maybe even at the onset of puberty, because because there's something to be said about having an ability from birth versus having it later. So I would liken it to just like human development, how maybe like we come into maturity at around the age of 13, 14, 15, start maturing and fully mature into our 20s. So I imagine it's very similar for betazoids, and there must be some evolutionary reason, and maybe Tam is an example of why that is, because it could be too much for the mind of a child to handle.
And that's absolutely the impression we get. I mean, they describe him as like a prodigy with respect to his telepathy, and Troy, it's revealed, was actually his psychologist back on Betazoid
when she was a student.
So I'm imagining she was like top of her class if she's
a patient, right?
Right. I mean, think about it. I mean, if he is her patient as a student, then obviously Troy is one of the top students at this whatever academy. And so there's a previous relationship there, and Tam is it Tam or Tan?
Tam, Tam.
Tam. Okay, Tam seems to have great difficulty just being around everybody on board the ship, with the exception of Data, because he can't. Obviously, being an android, he doesn't read his positronic brain as easily or at all, actually, like he does a humanoid brain. Mm-hmm. So he develops an affinity for Data. Of course, he has a previous close relationship with Troy, and they're his two anchors aboard the Enterprise, but he seems very frazzled, very put upon by just about everybody else. And of course, it's revealed that Tin Man has actually been reaching out to him, kind of an echo of Star Trek 1, where it seems like Spock was contacted by V'ger.
Good connection there. Go on.
Here we have sort of a similar scenario where Tam is drawn to Tin Man, and in fact, Tam is able to warn the Tin Man of the Romulan attack, and Tin Man responds by destroying the Romulans and crippling the Enterprise.
Unintentionally, but yes.
Unintentionally in the wake of this attack, and what proceeds is basically there's a second Romulan ship that is heading their way, and the Enterprise is trying to achieve repairs in order to get to Tin Man, beat the second Romulan ship, and there's this tension throughout the episode of we've got to get to Tin Man first. So it's really exciting. And finally, what happens is Picard makes a very tough call, and he allows Tam to beam aboard Tin Man with Data in order to make the first contact before the Romulans. And Tam and the what's the name, Gumtu? It turns out that
his Gumtu is his actual name, or
his actual name, and he
translated naturally, but
right, translated for our purposes, and Tam just achieves sort of a symbiosis with this being, and
which apparently the Tin Man either was bred or evolved into a living vessel, which feels that its purpose is to care for and protect its crew.
And it had a crew at one point, but the crew was killed in an accident. We learned that Gumtu possibly is the last of its kind. It hasn't encountered any other of its race in over a millennia, so it's a really sad story. So it's actually there at the start to die. It's like it's tired of life. I can't find anybody else of my species. What is my purpose? I'm just going to go, and this is communicated to Picard, and it moves him. It moves him. It's a tough call, but he sends Tam over, and immediately he achieves a sense of serenity and peace with the being, and they hit it off, and all of a sudden, another animated response from Gumtu. The Enterprise is swung
along with the Romulans,
and it's a la Q. I mean, it's on that level. It's just kind of like, I love the part where Riker actually spins.
Oh, they all do. Actually, it was really good. Yeah.
Yeah, but he put a lot of effort into it.
3.8 billion kilometers away from the sun,
and everyone spins back into their chairs, which is it's just so cheesy and so funny.
That was great. I loved it. Are you kidding? It was the physics. I loved it. About the physics, which was.
I'm not complaining. It was a cheesy moment, and the star goes supernova. It explodes, and for a brief moment, and I thought it was one of the best. This episode was extraordinary from beginning to end. But one of my favorite moments is when they think Data's gone, and Picard. Did you see that? Picard is like, Data. And then as soon as he says that, Data's right behind. He appears behind them.
Do you remember that they kind of echoed that in Nemesis, except this time?
Yes.
It was Picard. It was Picard standing in the doorway.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes.
You just got me a little verklempt, Doctor. Go on.
That was an extraordinary moment.
Yeah.
Even the way it was shot, Picard, Riker here, Troy there, everybody standing, everybody just staring at this explosion. It was an extraordinary moment. And then Data's there, and Picard, and he almost loses composure, and he's like, "What happened?" and Data, I think his line is like, "It's difficult to explain," and of course, Tam and Kamdu just go off on their own. They're now together, exploring the universe, and there's a wonderful coda to the episode where Troy and Data have a moment, and Data feels that he needs to communicate to her how important it was for Tam to have Troy understand why he left and why he did what he did, and Data reveals that in that moment when he saw Tam achieve that serenity and come to a place where he finally feels like this is where I belong, Data apparently had some sort of epiphany about where he belongs, and he says, "I belong here on the Enterprise."
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lovely moment where Troy just kind of embraces Data from behind.
That's very nice. Yeah, it was. Good.
Yeah, and extraordinary episode. My God. Wow.
Fantastic summary. You were really into it. I mean,
I had
I
I had this episode by itself
on VHS.
on a VHS tape because VHS tapes weren't to break at times, right?
Hmm.
So what happened is that sometimes I would be able to salvage, I would lose part of the tape, but I would have like maybe an hour.
Hmm.
So I would have like a 1 hour tape. And this was one of those 1 hour tapes because I so loved this episode.
This episode is probably one of those episodes I can only imagine where the production team and the writers and the showrunner were just like, I hope people really love it because it's such a good story. It felt so, even though it had echoes of other things, it felt so original and it was just performed beautifully. I wholeheartedly agree with you. And as I remember being very moved by it the first time I ever saw it. And then I had another experience when I rewatched it very recently. I just, as followers of the Starfleet boy know, I am the guardian of a cat named Arthur, and this is the first episode. After he'd been with me for about a week or whatever, he hadn't yet come into my bed to hang out or anything like that. He just kind of hung out in his own space and was very, cautious about me. Of course, just getting to know me. So I put on Star Trek: The Next Generation, and this episode was the one that was on my queue. And the cat Arthur came over, sat right next to me, and watched the whole episode. like
Wow.
with me, and I'm like, I kept like trying not to move so as not to like frighten him away, but it was just like a really touching kind of experience, and I have to
You're his
admit,
tin man.
we found each other. No, I mean, you can obviously imagine how the themes in this episode were echoing personally, and I think the floodgates opened, Doctor, and I got really emotional, and my cat just stared at me as I teared
Ay, ay,
up.
ay.
So there's a little bit of your captain's personal log. Uh, but yeah, so that was a really cool moment. I'm looking over at him as he sleeps. He's sleeping right now. He's taking a cat nap, which cats are prone to do. Uh, but uh, I guess yeah. Let's get right to it. What do you think? What did you think of Tam Elbram, the character,
That
played by Harry Groner? By the way.
Yeah, he's been on. Apparently, he was in a couple other Star Trek series afterwards.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
He was on Voyager, and he was on Enterprise.
Oh, very nice. Is he a
Uh,
genius or is he crazy or is he both?
I thought his performance was absolutely captivating, and I mean, this is a guy that pushes Picard away like one moment on the bridge, and you're like, "Holy shit! Did he just do that? He just
I
pushed
know.
Picard." And but you this actor just communicated so well the tortured aspect of that character of Tam. Just the it's interesting. This episode works on a lot of levels, and it's got two very potent storylines because of course you've got this the story of getting to Tin Man, but you've also got the story of this guy whom very quickly the episode manages to convey his rather tragic story, I would say. I mean, he's obviously a very gifted member of the Federation. I mean, he's like the go-to guy for very unusual first contacts.
Well,
Um,
he's referred to as the finest specialist in unknown life forms, and yeah, exactly.
yeah, I mean, he's the guy, and yet there's a huge price that he pays for this because of this gifted telepathy that he has, and it's conveyed expertly through the dialogue. It's also conveyed so well through the acting, especially in the part of Sirtis as Troy. She really brings her A game to this episode with how she feels. I mean, the way she conveys compassion for this guy, and I
Mhm.
love the dialogue they have together. You know, he calls her D.
Oh,
Um,
right. That's right. Her nickname.
there's an almost instant. You just instantly pick up on the great affection that they both have for each other, and you know, I mean, this is only it's like a 45-minute episode, yet you feel like
You've know, yeah,
you've known
yeah.
this whole situation for so
It's a
long. It's
very it's a
amazing.
very dense episode.
Absolutely.
Like
Oh
there's
yeah.
so much exposition and exciting little bits of dialogue, and again, this is like one of the benefits of following a series and knowing characters is that you can kind of now at this point, if you've been following the series, make a lot of assumptions, and like you have a really great idea of the landscape and the world. I mean, like, you know, popping into this is one of those, you know, I wonder if there's something to that. Like it's every now and then you get one of those episodes like we talked about, which are just like kind of payoff episodes. It's like you really have to have been watching the series and like understand and know Star Trek to get the, even though on a general level this episode just works, like it's a great story. There's a lot of details and nuances. It's just like replete with them that I think are delightful for fans of the show and fans of Star Trek in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is another one of those episodes,
Like that detail you just pointed out. Yeah.
right? And this is an episode where, and I can't remember what was the last time we made this comment, but it's an episode where you get to see the entire ship involved in this pursuit. I mean,
Hmm.
obviously Troy has a major part. Riker has his bit to do. He's got some great bits. He harbors this incredible
Dislike.
like resentment towards him because he actually lost, because that's the thing, that's the other part about Tam, the other
The
tragic bit about his
Garush
story,
disaster.
right, where apparently
It was a first contact situation
that went wrong
that went wrong. Yeah.
and lives were lost, and two of them were academy people that Riker went to the academy with, and you get the sense that, you know, he really, you know, I mean, well, that's the other thing. Tam just reads your mind. There's
Right. He just,
no
right. He's like, I mean, we've seen Loxana do this, but he does it in an even more brazen kind of way where he'll just like not even let you talk.
right, because I mean,
Yeah,
Loxana does it
like I
to
just hate you.
be no, this is casual and informal.
I know.
She does it to be playful, but he can't help himself.
Do you think he's showing off at all, or do you think is it really that he can't help himself? Like, is he just
I
frustrated, or what? You know, what do you think it is?
I interpret it as that he can't help himself. It's almost like you know, an Asperger's kind of thing. It's just it just kicks in.
It's
I mean,
interesting that you
imagine.
it's interesting that you touched on that because I thought about at least, you know, Asperger's or perhaps even just anything on the spectrum, you know, of autism, perhaps because we do like an extraordinary ability when we see cases of extraordinary, like gifted, like, you know, beyond comprehension ability in humans. There usually is a drawback that follows it. You know, like for example, we have some people like in the film Rain Man. He's got this extraordinary ability with numbers, yet he can't do things that you and I take for granted. And so there wasn't quite that degree of it, but Tam also has some disadvantages as a result of his ability. He becomes isolated and is often misunderstood because of things like not letting people have their thoughts or finishing, you know, their sentences for them, or even coming across as abrasive and things like that. And so I feel like we see hints of why Tam has been kind of isolated from the rest of his society and in general society in general. here, which is maybe related to his extraordinary abilities. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking right now of a former student at the school who was a very, very smart kid, very, very smart, but he was socially off, and when he was on his meds, you could tell there was a change, and it was very sad to see, because I remember, he would have, he I remember he would just do extreme things. Like I remember he shaved his head, and um and he came up to me one day, and he was checking out Mein Kampf,
Oh my.
and he put it on the counter, and this is the way he would talk. He was like, "Yeah, I know what you're thinking. He shaved his head. He's checking out Mein Kampf. Yeah, he's a neo-Nazi now." Like, he's just communicating that out with no filters, and that's how he was. He had no filters. And when I look at somebody like the
Tam
character
Elbram.
Tam, he has no filters. Brilliant. But that's the thing, is that they have no filters, and they are aware of it, because I remember this kid at some point, he had a horrible issue with his father, unfortunately, and he made a comment once that he is aware of when he crosses the line socially, but he is unable to stop himself when he doesn't have the meds, and he's aware of it. But they just can't. They don't know. They can't. And Tam, that's what I got from his performance, is that his impatience with Picard, his testiness with Riker. I think it's just
But
as
he
they
does
indicated.
well. But he does well with Deanna, and he does extremely well with Data. So I do think that that's the case also with folks who
Absolutely.
are on the spectrum in some way, because I've got a few friends, some really close friends who have some form of Asperger's or autism, or even different conditions altogether, like bipolar disorder, and I've seen them suffer through it in similar ways as you can describe, where they can't, the filter isn't there, or whatever the case may be. Yet I'm fortunate to still have a functional relationship and an understanding, and I think it, maybe this is a little too naive here, but I think it all just comes down to patience and kindness, and not everyone has the time or the demeanor to have that kind of personality. So I think that's where a lot of the conflict comes in with folks that are different. And to harken back to a portion of this episode where Data seems genuinely perturbed or depressed that Tam can't read his thoughts, to the point where he even wonders, am I anything more than just a collection of circuits and neuro pathways? And Tam says, just because I can't read your mind doesn't mean that you're not there. It just means you're different, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just like Tam, I think it's a great thing, because had Deanna seen that interaction, I think she would have been very proud of Tam, because that's probably what she taught him through their interactions. And here he is now, kind of showing that he got the lesson there. So I thought that was another kind of nice moment in this episode, and also tying into what we were just talking about. Differences are just that. They're just nuances in we all have differences, and normal is relative. So that's something that I'm so proud to have learned because of shows like Star Trek. And I feel like you do need to be reminded of it, because it's so easy to just feel comfortable in the sameness, because there is so much sameness.
Right.
It's something you do have to be reminded of. But when I am reminded of it, it does fill my heart with a kind of joy to know that I'm not alone. I'm not the same as you. And so our differences, I think, can unite us. It's just a matter of how we perceive them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so much of
Off the
no,
soapbox.
no. I mean, I think that's what I mean. This episode has so many layers, and everything that you said is absolutely, you know, it's one of the things that flows out of this episode. There's so many layers to this episode. You know, Troy, as you were mentioning, Troy, you know, Troy is really, you really see that Troy saved this guy's life.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing the aftermath of it here, and like you said, what you can see that whatever you know, that moment he had with Data is absolutely something that she would have been proud of, and you can understand that Troy really saved this guy's life. Troy is a hidden hero in this episode. You don't
Right.
you see it through how this guy acts and all this stuff, and the conversations that they have, and it's an amazing layer to this episode. And another thing is, you know, Data's little arc in this show is like this hidden B plot
A
that's
gem, yeah, a little.
that's just dug in there, but it's there.
Right.
And like you said, that scene where he has that moment of like, well, maybe I'm just neural pathways connected to whatever circuits, and you know, I mean, to have something like that in this episode, you know, where it could have just been a very straightforward action oriented kind of thing, but to have that peppered in there it's just, I mean, it's an extraordinary balance that the show features with all the characters. You know, Picard has some great moments as well, especially the moment where he has Troy and Data in his ready room, and you know, this guy, he's so sharp. You know, he has him in there because he says, you know, Mr. Data, I've noticed you've developed an affinity with him. Like, I mean, Picard sees all this, man. He's sharp. He knows who to call in.
He's
and
the Picard. I mean,
he's
like,
the Picard, and you're seeing
and
it there.
we get the full Picard. We've been getting more and more of the full Picard. Going back to that scene with Counselor Troy and Tam, you referenced real quick, of their conversation, and kind of like where it's kind of for us where we're catching up with their story a little bit, and you know, we get a little bit of knowledge as to what happened at the Garushtan disaster. And I was wondering what you thought about that, because he says that he got too caught up in or involved in the other side's perspective, and that maybe he didn't warn the commander soon enough, and their personalities seem to conflict a little bit too. It seems like, you know, Tam was, again, best intentions, but not communicating or getting along for whatever reason. And I kind of thought that was interestingly conveyed, because that's exactly the relationship I believe Riker and Tam had in this episode. You know, it's like Riker's just immediately put off by Tam, and you can see how anyone could be. I mean, like, he's kind of, again, abrasive and just like, you know, dismissive of you. And even in that scene in the ready room, he just like, where he's defending himself. You know, remember the scene where he's like,
yeah,
you know,
Riker thinks it, and then he reacts,
and then he's like, he reacted,
and Riker's like, nah, you, and he's like, look, buddy, I think, does he call him buddy boy or something like that?
Yeah, like cowboy. But I mean, it's a confrontation that was it was really intense, but like, what was great about it is that the writers showcased Tam's ability there. Riker couldn't get a word in, and the argument all happened in a way that we understood exactly what was. It was just such a good writing. But I imagine in a tense situation in the Garushtan disaster, a similar vibe or similar type of thing happening. And then later on, Picard even admits, he's like, I have no confidence in you.
Yeah.
As much as he's moved in that scene in sickbay by Tin Man's loneliness, and you could see, by the way, Patrick
Oh,
Stewart, like just like change he changes like from Captain Picard to Jean-Luc the explorer, the the academic, the like
yeah.
the just like what they're out there for, to find strange new worlds and new life and new civilizations. It's
Oh,
like it's all there. And but yet he has a responsibility to his ship and his crew, and he says, like, how can I trust you? Did you give one single thought when you warned Tin Man? Did you give one single thought to the Enterprise? And Counselor Troy is about to say something or object, and because she thinks maybe Captain Picard's gone a little too far, but Tam, no, he's like, no, he's right.
yeah.
But this is your only chance now, because obviously the danger was there that the ship is not up to its full operations at the moment, and the Romulans are getting heated and stuff like that. So really, just again, how do you fit all that in like 2 minutes? Like that scene was was only like
It
two
was
minutes,
bad.
and yet
Yeah.
yet there's so much information, and it was so beautiful, like beautifully directed, beautifully written. I guess we should take a quick moment to acknowledge the writers of this episode. And I'm gonna go to the internet for that. And so it's the credit goes to two writers. It's Dennis
Well,
Russell
it's three
Bailey.
writers.
What's that?
It's three writers, in fact, but they could only give the credit to two because at the time the
Oh,
Writers Guild only allowed for two. But in
was that
fact, there's
right?
a yeah. If you go to Memory Alpha, I think you'll see it.
Okay, well, so I don't know who the third one is, but I know it's Dennis Russell Bailey and David Bischoff, and the story is actually based on his book, which was written in '76, somewhere between '76 and '79, called Tin Woodman.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the information that I have. But yeah, I didn't know about
I
the.
would I if you could, I would recommend you share the image of the cover. I think the image of the cover is very interesting of
Tin
Tin
Woodman.
Woodman. Yeah, if you Google it. I'll say briefly as you're doing that. David Bischoff is an actor. I believe that's how you pronounce it. He's a writer that I'm very familiar with because he's written tie-in novels for a lot of things that I've read, including Alien versus Predator. I still
Oh,
have a few of his books, and I think they're excellent. He's written. He even wrote a Sequest novel. Remember Sequest?
what?
Yeah, yeah. He wrote some novels for Space Precinct, the Jerry Anderson show. So he's one of those writers that I've seen all my life, and I've never read any of his original works. Unfortunately, I'm sure this must kill writers when they hear that. But he's written for the Next Generation. He wrote a Next Generation novel as well, which I have somewhere. I can't remember which one it is.
Let's see if I can share this thing here for you. And whoops, what did I just do?
Oh wow, you found a really funky one. That's not the one that I was looking at. Wow. Where did you find that?
He said to do a Google search.
That is not the
Nothing that
one
came
that
up
I
with.
really.
Here's some other ones. Let's see. There's this one.
That one.
That's the
I
one.
love that one.
All right, let's look at that one a
Look
little
at the
bit.
layout of that one.
Yeah, that one's cool.
I love that one.
It's interesting that this novel was the genesis for this TV show, some, close to 20 years later, not that much later, 15 years later, 10, 15 years later. But I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So those are some really trippy covers there.
I thought that particular one that I picked up was trippy because it reminded me a little bit of the Borg.
Right? Yeah. No, I was surprised. I didn't see that one when I looked. That's a really good one.
Do you
Very
remember?
trippy.
Do you remember? I just had a thing. Speaking of trippy, there's this reference to how after the Garushta, I hope I'm saying that right, the Garushta disaster, these like names sometimes,
I know.
I can't remember them all. I'm so sorry,
What the
audience.
hell?
I wish I had a minutia for these things, but uh, after the disaster, no one had heard from Tam because he retreated to Chandra 5, and I wonder if that's a reference to Dr. Chandra from 2001 or not.
Oh, behave. Oh, wow.
But
Good one. Good
he said
one.
the Chandrans were like this amazing. I just wish we could have seen them, or there might be some illustrations out there or something like that, because they said that their minds were like crystal clear, like glacial, and it took 3 days for them just to say hello. They have a ritual for a 3 day hello. Can you imagine that?
I
And
know,
that's kind of
right?
where he had been finding his peace until this creature, this life form, reached out to him across the distances of space. And I have to say that another credit to the writers is that, like, Tin Man is consistently extraordinary. First of all, Tin Man's reaching out to this one mind, this singular mind, and I don't know what his range is, but in all of the galaxy, right? He's then able to catapult the Enterprise 3.8 billion kilometers away, safely away from the supernova, so they can kind of observe it in that nice little super distant supernova effect. But then he beams, I'm imagining he beams data from the same distance. Like, he just transports him like it's nothing. Uh,
Extraordinary.
and
Yeah.
it begs the question, what were the people, like, what were what was the race that inhabited this vessel and shared a symbiotic relationship with it. I wonder if there's any kind of
Time
like,
Lords.
I I had the
Sorry.
same thought of a dying TARDIS. I did indeed have the same thought about a dying TARDIS. Um, I think that's an extraordinary idea too, by the way. Like, as far in the future and as extraordinary as Star Trek The Next Generation is, that we keep seeing references to even greater feats of the past, like eons before humanity even existed. And it comes up again and again. It's not just there's legend of this kind of thing in human mythology as well. Some speculate that the beings that we think of as the gods, uh, Greek and Roman and so on, and Egyptian and whatnot, and perhaps the Christian God itself might be inspired by a greater entity that once interacted with humanity in some way, so, or that we have knowledge of, that's lost. I have to put my hair up like the guy from Ancient Astronauts, and then we can kind of talk more about that.
Chariot
But
of the Gods.
yeah, exactly. Anyways, yeah, so what did you think of kind of that whole thing that they touch on, that theme, if you do you even see it at all?
Yeah, well, I mean, being a Doctor Who fan, yeah, I see Tin Man as a variation on a TARDIS like vehicle of some kind, creature of some kind.
For those who don't know, the ship that the Doctor, that Time Lords, the ships that Time Lords travel through are part biological in some way. They're actually considered life forms, right?
Yes, and in fact, there are stories that touch upon the symbiotic nature of the Time Lord who is piloting the TARDIS,
Mm-hmm.
and the TARDIS, which you have one actually right there, right next to you, the TARDIS right up there. I see. If you want to, there we go.
That's exactly how it travels, by the
Excellent, excellent. I love the props.
way. For once, I
Uh,
have a prop.
exactly. That's great. And actually, there's an excellent story. Oddly enough, I can only remember a graphic novel. There's an excellent. Well, actually, it was in the Doctor Who magazine where you actually see what happens when what happens to a TARDIS when its Time Lord uh, pilot dies.
Oh.
and it's a Sixth Doctor strip. It's called The World Shapers, and it's actually the first Doctor Who magazine I ever bought, and I was just I was dumbstruck. I was like, oh my god, this is what happens to the TARDISes when they're, and I was very moved by the story of Gomtu, the Tin Man, and the idea of this being just going through the galaxy by itself. It's kind of like The Last Unicorn. You remember that movie?
Oh gosh, I have a vague. Whoa.
The Last Unicorn hadn't seen one of her kind for I think something like a millennia as well, and was suddenly struck one day by the thought that, oh, what if
Ooh.
what if oh, what if I'm the last of my kind? What if there are no more unicorns? So I think that's a very potent. It's a very dramatic story, and this episode really conveys it very well, and you feel for this. It's extraordinary. You gum through. You don't have some disembodied voice. You never hear it. You never.
Except that woo sound.
That's it, right? But you never have like this moment where you think, oh, like as the audience, you only experience it really through Tam, and yet you develop such a compassion for it. I mean, I felt more for Gumtu than I did for the space amoeba way back in Encounter at Farpoint.
Well, it's a beautiful design. I mean, there's this I can't I hope this doesn't diminish its beauty, but it looks like an acorn with like light extruding out of it, and it just looks kind of like it looks like a vessel, but it also looks very natural. Oddly, it reminded me a tiny bit of Flight of the Navigator. Did you also have that in mind?
Absolutely. Thank you. I was so happy you said that.
Yeah, there was a kind of and I can imagine that the shape can shift and all kinds of things. I mean, you do see it in that one scene, the captain's chair. I guess it's like a raw TARDIS in a way, because as we know, or the ship from Flight of the Navigator, it can just mold to whatever it needs to be, and that's an extraordinary kind of ability in and of itself. And it's always kind of been something that I think lends better to create it. When you imagine different kinds of life, imagining a life form that is a starship, it's like,
Yeah.
this is one way to look at it, is that like it's, and Data even says, he's like, is the purpose of life to care for another, and so that's Gumtu or Tin Man's purpose, is to care for its crew, and it's just a completely sad story, as you said, learning that the crew died in some kind of disaster, and I can only imagine, again, we don't experience the feelings directly, but the set design, the sound design, the performances, and whatever Tam Elbram is conveying, and his emotional expression, we do totally understand what Tin Man is feeling, and it's just such despair and sadness. And I can only imagine it's just like heartbreaking, and it was heartbreaking to watch it, and it really does draw you in emotionally as well.
You just mentioned the sound design. We cannot go any further without acknowledging the incredible score.
Yes. This composer did like 42 episodes for TNG. His name's Jay Chataway. I don't know his other episodes, but yeah.
This episode was scored like a film.
It was really brilliant. The motifs or leitmotifs for the different characters. Tin Man, I think every time they talked about him and his ancientness, you heard that pan flute or whatever it was, like, I can't.
Was it a what do you that Australian thing? A didgeridoo or?
There might be. I don't know. There were a lot of things going on, but I definitely recognize that instrument that Zamfir plays. The little the pan flute. Are you just alarmed
You
that I
dated
mentioned
yourself there?
Did I did I alarm you with my Zamfir reference? George Zamfir, who I am. Yes, I am a fan of
Yikes! I'm trying to defend the score, man.
I'm a child of the '80s. What are you talking about? I'm know who George Zamfir is.
You wearing that Goonies shirt? You truly are.
I know it's true. It's very true. Do we want to go ahead?
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Do we want to talk about the Romulans at all?
Well, one of the incredible things about this episode is just the tension. I mean, you are at just grabbing hold of your chair every 10 minutes because the frickin' Romulans are like right on their tail, and I had I've said many times that I felt that this season was the season that the Romulans are going to be the big threat, and we're going to get, and this episode feeds into that. I mean, you're just like, holy shit, these Romulans are going to get there, and that attack on the Enterprise. Wow. It comes out of nowhere.
Really, it's just like really good scenes, excellent scenes. I mean, just the fact, also building on the Romulan character a little bit, the fact that the first ship was just, they burnt their engine core out.
Suicide run.
Yeah, just so that they could get to Tin Man first. And then the Romulans were prepared to destroy Tin Man rather than hand him over to the Federation and all these things. Then one thing I did come to realize watching Tam's ability in a tactical situation is that, okay, so he's obviously an extraordinary example of a Betazoid, right? And we know that Counselor Troy can only really sense emotion and intention, not so much thoughts, right? But there are there other Betazoids serving in Starfleet, and if so, like, can you imagine the tactical advantage of having a telepath on board your ship? And I'm surprised that we haven't seen that more often, because I think a regular level telepath in close proximity in these battles would be able to like convey some of the enemy's intentions to her captain or his captain. And I'm wondering why there isn't just more of that in Star Trek. That would be an interesting thing. And or was there a time where this kind of was an advantage that Starfleet used, and maybe that's why Romulans in the original series era wore helmets like Magneto to shield their minds from from other telepaths.
Whoa.
That was a little too much.
That's a thought. Damn. That I don't know what to say to that. That's interesting. I will say that what you just touched on, I think, is, I thought those things when I saw Nemesis, because I think it's not until Nemesis.
Oh yeah, she uses her ability for tactical advantage. Yeah.
Not only that, but of course the Viceroy,
right,
is also. I mean, you realize that these two telepaths are working across vast distances, and I think in the first season I made a few comments about Troy and the inconsistency of her abilities, and
the continued development of her abilities by the writers, perhaps.
I think we've sort of settled onto what exactly it is she's capable of doing. But of course, Nemesis just kind of like pops that bubble, and you're like, wait a minute, she's able to do what? Okay, that's kind of odd. Um, that could have been handy in many, many previous situations.
Mm-hmm.
However, again, like as you pointed out, Troy is merely an empath and not a telepath.
Right, she's half human,
Um,
so she didn't
right.
develop her telepathy.
Now,
There's a
the
bit.
only thing, right, exactly. Now, the only thing I can think of is that perhaps the Betazoids take, echoing the Deltans and their oath of celibacy. Perhaps the Betazoids take some
Mm.
oath of uh, putting restrictions on their telepathic abilities, because I mean, as we saw with Tam, and as we see with Troy's mom, it can get very invasive.
Mm-hmm.
This telepathic crap that the Betazoids can misuse if they really want to. So
Right.
I mean, it could just be something that perhaps that's one of the regulations that are imposed on Betazoids when they go and join Starfleet is well, if you're going to do this, if you're going to go out into the greater world, you have to follow these rules. And because obviously people don't appreciate having you rummaging through their thoughts. So and also I don't think Star Trek has really delved too much into the repercussions of the abilities of these telepathic abilities by Betazoids. I mean, like I said, obviously we have Troy, but she's only half, and she's only empathic, and we know that she encounters several issues as the show goes on from time to time. So I can only imagine what a full Betazoid goes through.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's a very good question.
When Tam kind of reaches out and warns Tin Man, and then he does that Star Trek one, Star Trek the Motion Picture. It is the same effect, I think, right? Isn't it like
It is.
the
It,
kind of
it
like
V'ger explodes.
the same V'ger explosion thing.
Yeah.
Um, and so the Enterprise is pretty heavily damaged after that. And I thought one scene that kind of just was a little bit humorous was in if that were on the original Enterprise, um, Scotty would have said something like, "I, Captain, it'll take 2 hours to repair the ship, but I'll do it for you in 30 minutes." And then Captain Kirk would have been really pleased with that. But Geordi says it'll take 30 minutes, and Picard
You have 10.
you have 10 minutes, right? Which puts a lot of pressure on Geordi, and I'm sure he, like he figures it out. But it
Don't you
kind
love
of
his face?
I do. I kind of love that moment, because now I'm wondering how often this happens, because later I do recall very clearly Scotty passing on this trick or this knowledge to Geordi in an upcoming episode, which is not till I think next season, but
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. It's
so
true. It's true.
that was a little moment. The other kind of humorous moment in the episode, which we didn't really touch on, is, or I guess we did. Doesn't DeSoto say to like have some kind of rapport with Riker, and
Yeah.
he says, "Are you getting soft aboard that luxury liner?" And so here we are again. It's kind of interesting that like this is not the first time that we've seen the Enterprise D referenced as like a cushy, comfortable ship, and she's even thought of that way uh, among Starfleet captains, which is interesting too.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, what is this?
You're quite popular there with the subspace.
Oh, crap. It's give me 1 sec, hold on.
Oh, okay, sure. um, let's see what the I'll do. We're having a moment where the doctor is going to take a phone call. It's I'm going to do a play-by-play here. He's talking to his beautiful sweetheart. That tells me it's almost time to wrap things up, Doctor.
Yeah.
So
Let's
let's go to the book, and then I have a few notes that I
go to the
want to touch on as we go.
We'll go through the notes as I get to the.
Another one thing I noted was Harry Groner's performance when he first beams aboard the ship. We didn't talk about this, but he's finishing Picard's sentence, and he's like, here are your orders, blah blah. And then he's truly startled to even find Data standing there. Like
Oh
just
yeah,
like,
he's totally
like
surprised.
he's
Like,
totally
where'd you
surprised.
come
And I
from?
like that little touch to showcase that he can't read his thoughts, and like what a delight and a surprise at the same time that is to him. Oh, and then the other thing I liked was that he acknowledges that Deanna seems to have found her place where she fits in. So it seems like the thing that they related to back when he was her patient might have been that Deanna herself didn't feel like she fit in, and that would be an interesting to. I think that would have been an interesting thing to explore about her character, which, if I'm not mistaken, we never really go into her youth or her past. But it makes sense because she's half human.
Right, right. And the book just pointed out that the period of time where she met Tam and was his psychologist is, of course, the same time where she was with Riker on Beta's aid. So
Oh.
perhaps that's another layer there. When Riker has this
Oh.
animosity, it's because there's probably prior interactions with
With
Tam.
Tam.
Yeah.
I mean, you could tell that she was very invested in Tam Elbram, and that makes, wow, that's like, so are there no periphery novels based on this, or that go back
There
that
are no peripheral novels with Tam. I looked at Memory Beta. The only peripheral novels that I picked up on were with DeSoto and his relationships with Picard. They were lieutenants together at some point, serving aboard a ship, and obviously DeSoto was Riker's previous commander. There's a book called The Buried Age, which is sort of like, remember the Lost Years, the novel The Lost Years with Star Trek, the original. The Buried Age is sort of the Lost Years version of For Next Generation, and apparently he shows up there. And then there's interestingly enough, there's a novel, a DS9 novel called Valhalla, where the DS9 crew encounter a sentient ship, and O'Brien, whom we see for one scene in this episode, O'Brien recalls Tin Man, which is in an interesting bit of continuity.
That's fascinating.
Yes, and I'll just finally end it with DeSoto apparently is the admiral that how do we say it, debriefs Janeway when she arrives.
Oh, he becomes Admiral DeSoto.
He becomes an admiral, and he's the one that debriefs her. This is off camera. This isn't a novel. He's the one that debriefs her in the events following this series, Voyager. So, but no, I didn't find anything on Tam, and this creature, Gumtrue, doesn't really show up anywhere else. So
I think it would be wonderful. I don't know what it would be about. I can't imagine it at the moment, but I think it'd be wonderful to have a follow-up or a prequel. There were once millions of Tin Man, and to even just to discover what happened to all of them. Did they all journey to someplace beyond the galaxy or the universe itself? Or what could have happened to all these creatures?
I actually disagree with you. I think preserve the mystery. This episode is perfect.
I'll acquiesce to that.
I gotta give Emma a call, so I'm gonna jump right to it. I give it a 10.
I know we already know that you give it a 10 and I give it a 10, and thank you for talking about
Bob's your uncle, as you say. Yeah,
Bob's your uncle. Hey, this is a great I had a great time talking about this. So obviously there's a lot more we could talk about, but we could go on for hours and hours, but we won't. We have
8 hours, I believe you said.
Yeah, it's like Google Hangouts. You can do them for 8 hours straight. But we'd love to. This was such a great episode. We'd love to hear from you, our audience, and we look forward to hearing from you. So feel free, if you're watching it on the YouTube, to comment below, or write us an email at starfleetboy@gmail.com, or you could write us through Twitter or Instagram. It's all Starfleet Boys. Or you can just go to starfleetboy.com. Oh, and a new thing real quick, Doctor. Sign up for our newsletter. You can find it on the About page. And Doctor, if you haven't checked it out,
What?
yeah, if you haven't checked it out, look on the About page because you're there. Right.
What?
Yeah, so go check it out.
What?
And on that note, live long and prosper, peace in our time, and I'll see you next time.